Casemiro is a player that's had a bit of an up and down Manchester United career, but he's certainly getting the plaudits right now, and deservedly so. And I do feel like I owe Casemiro a bit of an apology, because I was one of many people that thought his days might be numbered at Manchester United. I did worry that we were watching the decline of a once great player, but we have seen in recent weeks, especially in the Europa League, just how good he is and how good he can be as well, and just how vital he is to Manchester United, especially if we are going to lift the Europa League. His performances in Europe in particular have been phenomenal, and we saw it the other night against Athletic Club, how not just the goal, but his performance in that midfield, it just reminded you of what a great player Casemiro great player he is, to be honest with you. Now, when he arrived at Manchester United, he was joining a team that had already had a bit of an up and down spell. We'd had lost the first two games. Then when he came in, we got our act together. He didn't always start in those first few games that he came in, of course, but we began to put a bit of a win together. But it wasn't easy joining a Manchester United team that had lost the first game at home to Brighton and then a 4-0 battering away at Brentford. And apparently he'd been told, or he told his agent that, tell them I'm coming, don't worry, I'm going to come there and fix everything. So he arrived at Old Trafford with a big reputation, having been part of one of the best midfields in world football, alongside the likes of Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. Those three players for Real Madrid won the lot. And this was a player who won five Champions Leagues. That's incredible record. To win 2 more Champions Leagues than Manchester United as a club have won is just, quite frankly, ridiculous. So there's a lot of expectation. And for many months, he lived up to that expectation. Some of his performances were just what you'd expect from one of the best midfielders in the world. And it wasn't always easy as well, because you've got a midfield that was obviously not the levels of Kroos and Modric, but it was a little bit different, playing alongside the likes of Fred, playing alongside the likes of Christian Eriksen, Scott McTominay as well, of course. But for a spell, Casemiro did very, very well. And I think the pinnacle of Casemiro's first season at Manchester United was that Carabao Cup final against Newcastle, helping to deliver that silverware. United hadn't won any trophies for a little while now. It's been like a mini drought, and it had been about 6 years. He comes in, and what do you know? By February, we've lifted a trophy, and it mattered as well. And his performance at Wembley that day was amazing. I was at the game and we were just in awe of him, and it was just such an important win for Manchester United. It felt like we needed a trophy. We needed to start getting back on track. Well, it didn't last for too long, but it massively helped. And that performance was second to none. And I remember the footage of him as well, hugging the fan as he came down the steps as well. It just summed up everything that we was missing at Manchester United. That sort of leadership, that sort of quality, and that sort of connection with the fans as well. Everyone loved Casemiro. But then there was a spell as well around this time where things started to go a little bit wrong. There was I won't say disciplinary issues, right? Because I feel like that's harsh. But he received a couple of red cards that, when you look at both of them, you feel like he probably didn't deserve them. There was the one against Crystal Palace for the I don't even know what to call it, touching Will Hughes. What was it? He didn't really grip him up. He sort of grabbed his collar a little bit, didn't he? And he was sent off for that. Then there was one against Southampton as well. Casemiro ended up missing, I think it was about 9 games through suspension. He also picked up a booking at Selhurst Park, which meant that he was to miss the game at the Emirates, and everyone was looking forward to see what he could do against Arsenal in that big game, and he missed it through suspension. And those 2 red cards in particular seemed to affect Casemiro. He wasn't quite the same player towards the end of the season. He wasn't the player that we'd seen prior to that, and I don't know if it got in his head a little bit, if it affected him psychologically, but it was evident. You could see that he'd suffered a little bit. And I think one of the reasons Casemiro, perhaps after that period, his performances weren't quite as good as well, is the ever-changing midfield. Eriksen got injured. He wasn't quite the player that he had been previously. Then you saw the likes of Fred, who'd been doing quite well alongside Casemiro at times, showing a lot of running in that midfield, which helped Casemiro. He eventually moved on. So Casemiro was, in some cases, almost left to his own devices. Now, in his second season, things started to go a little bit wrong for Casemiro. The performances weren't always up to the standard that we've seen previously. The club itself and the team itself was struggling. There was big question marks around not just the midfield, but the entire team. There was big gaps all over the pitch, including in midfield. And then Casemiro was asked to play in defence. And it didn't really work out. And you look at the game against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, where Manchester United were beaten 4-0. I think Jamie Carragher said, is this the end of Casemiro? Is it time for him to go to the MLS or maybe to Saudi? He spoke about leaving the football before the football leaves you.
Leave the football before the football leaves you.
Now, to be fair to Jamie Carragher, I know it's easy to hammer him and everyone, he's a Scouser, what does he know, all that sort of jazz. But there was a lot of people questioning Casemiro. You remember seeing that game and the likes of Eberechi Eze just sort of running past him as he slid across the floor. It wasn't great, was it? But he was being asked to play out of position, and he was also being asked to play alongside, I think Johnny Evans wasn't even fully fit. it wasn't a fully functional midfield. I think you had Casemiro, who was phenomenal and all the rest of it, but then you had Christian Eriksen in front of him. So it wasn't like he had much protection as well. And I'm not going to excuse some of those performances around that time because they weren't good enough. The Arsenal game at Old Trafford, where he was in defence, is one that sticks in my memory. Didn't come out, clear out defence quick enough and played everyone on side. You can look at it and go, okay, is this a player that's in decline now? Is this a player that's not just having a bad bit of form, but someone that probably does need to move on? And there was rumours when he wasn't in the squad for the FA Cup final that he'd not picked up a knock, but he'd actually been dropped from the team and then was unhappy, so wasn't on the bench either. Regardless of all that, going into this season, we was hoping to see a better version of Casemiro. I remember seeing him in pre-season when we was away in America at the training session in LA, and he looked sharp, he looked leaner, he looked fitter, and you think, okay, maybe this is Casemiro getting back to his best, because if we can get Casemiro back to his best, he'd be a massive asset to Manchester United. And unfortunately, it didn't start off that way. The season started off pretty badly for Casemiro, and we saw it in that game against Liverpool. That was probably the low point of all low points. Casemiro getting subbed at half-time with the team. I think we were 2-0 down, and getting subbed for Toby Collier, the youngster. I mean, it wasn't great, was it? To be honest with you, Casemiro had made a couple of sloppy passes that had led to goals, and I'm not going to completely excuse it because it wasn't good enough, but also he wasn't the only one who was having a bad game in that match, and it kind of felt like he was getting all the blame. I know he's giving the ball away, but in some cases he gave the ball away and that was it. They scored, and it shouldn't happen like that. If your midfielder gives the ball away, it shouldn't mean that's automatically a goal against you. But you can't deny he wasn't having a good spell. People looking at it going, yeah, he's probably on his way out, especially when he's getting replaced by, I think Toby Collier, was it his Premier League debut or thereabouts? He's not played many games, has he? So you're getting replaced by a player who's just coming into the side, a youngster coming into the side, and you're more or less getting blamed for the fact your team are 2-0 down against Liverpool. So many people looked at it and thought, is this the end? Is this it for Casemiro? But when Ruben Amorim came in, it seemed like Casemiro did get a new lease of life. Not straight away. Now I remember when Casemiro wasn't playing under Ruben Amorim, thinking, is he going to be unhappy? Is he going to spit his dummy out? Is he going to sort of show a bit of petulance or anything like that? And he didn't. I remember watching Casemiro warming up in a few of those early games under Ruben Amorim, and no matter whether he was picked or not, he was always giving advice to players on the pitch. He was always giving advice to his teammates. He seemed to have a really good attitude, and he had those leadership qualities. And we saw that, didn't we? When we played Chelsea, we saw, I think that was under Ruud van Nistelrooy, to be fair, but when we played Chelsea and Alejandro Garnacho gave the ball away, and we saw Casemiro giving him a right rollicking, something that had perhaps been missing at times from the Manchester United side, a bit of leadership, a bit of experience. And there's no doubt that when players look at Casemiro and the trophies he's won, they can't deny he's got the right to give him a bit of a rollicking when they need it. You look at a player there that's won the lot, so he's going to have the respect of his teammates. More recently, though, we've seen the best of Casemiro. We really have, and you might go, come on, Jay, he's not as good as he was at Real Madrid. But some of these performances have really been top tier. He's weighed in with important goals. Some of his passing has been exemplary. You can see how he can pick out sort of passes that other players just aren't capable of doing as well. And even his tackles, in some games, he's putting in more tackles than anyone else. And his timing his tackles much better. I spoke earlier about that sort of image or that footage of him sliding past Eze at Selhurst Park, and how it almost became a bit of a meme. But lately, we've seen him sliding into tackles and perfectly timing them and winning the ball back. And that's what we've missed in this midfield. Casemiro hasn't had it easy at Manchester United. He left the team at Real Madrid where he'd come from one of the best midfielders in the world to come into a team that was a little bit dysfunctional, that had a rotating midfield. 1 minute it's Scott McTominay's pushed further up the pitch, he's getting the goals. Then at one point it was Casemiro who was pushed further up the pitch, he was getting the goals. Then you've got Fred doing your running, then you haven't, then you've got Casemiro coming in who did very well. I'm not saying he didn't, but it's just constantly changing, and it must affect a player as well. And then you're being asked to play in defence, and in some cases being asked to play in a makeshift defence alongside a player in Johnny Evans who's in his mid-30s and isn't even fully fit. I'm not blaming Johnny Evans for any of this, I'm just saying it's not helpful, is it, for Casemiro? But what he has done recently, or what he's been able to do under Ruben Amorim, is playing a midfield that suits him, that suits his skill set. You've got players like Manuel Ugarte, for example, who does have legs, who can do that bit of extra running that perhaps Casemiro has needed alongside him at times, but has been missing. And we've benefited from that. We've benefited in Europe in particular from having this Casemiro, this version of him, who maybe doesn't have to cover as much ground and isn't being given as much responsibility as he was previously. And long may it continue. Listen, I don't know what's going to happen with Casemiro in the summer. I don't know if he's going to stay at Manchester United or if he does end up leaving. We know he's on massive money. There may be a desire from the club to move him on because they get him off the wage bill. But if he keeps up these performances we've seen, maybe it's a bit too premature to say he's done at Manchester United. I remember Ryan Giggs in his sort of mid-30s. People thought he was done. People thought he's not quite the same Ryan Giggs we've seen previously. Yeah, he went on towards the last stage of his career to play almost as well as he'd ever played. So who knows? I know it's a big ask to say that Casemiro's going to play until he's 40 years old and going to keep winning titles to his late 30s. Even winning any title at Manchester United would be a massive achievement. But I just think you can't count him out, and we should be very grateful that we've got Casemiro right now, because we need him, and he's been vital to this team under Ruben Amorim, and hopefully he can be vital to winning us a trophy come the end of this month. I owe Casemiro an apology. I'm not the only one though. A lot of people dismissed him, but you shouldn't, because he's still top class.
Good morning, good morning. Hello.
Don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe. I'm Jay Motti. This has been a look at Casemiro. Get involved in the comments and let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.